That's either good or bad, depending how you look at the internet. But yeah, I mean, it's just a nice break because I always call a carrier a fun prison, particularly for aviators where you can get parole and go fly. It's not like there's working parties, but you're fed whatever they're feeding you, and you're stuck with people that if you don't have good chemistry, you can't get away from. You're within 1,000 feet. So but you kind of know it when you sign up for it, I would say.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, if you don't know you're going to be heading out to sea for 9 months or so when you join the Navy, let this be your notice. That's what you're going to do. Top Gun. Talk to me your path to Top Gun and what Top Gun was like and what did you do after you graduated?
Yeah, and if people are watching or listening to this and thinking, oh, I've seen Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick, I know everything about what that's like. No, sorry to say, it's nothing like that.
What?
So when you leave Top Gun, I'll start at the end, you go back to the fleet as a training officer. And you are then the person in charge of making sure everyone is as tactical as possible. Well, the training officer that came to VFA 86, where I was a junior officer, was Chili Winter. And he was amazing dude. I mean, again, like we talked about before, he probably was the guy in flight school who made everything look easy, and darn him was good looking and just, good on the ball and everything. And so he came to VFA 86 and took an interest in everyone and everything. And one day we're sitting around like, Jell-O, what are you going to do after 86? I said, yeah, I don't know, don't really want to be a Blue Angel, don't really want to be an astronaut, so I don't want to go to top test pilot school. I said, I think what I'd really like, I'm not that good at landing on the boat, so I'm not trying to be an LSO. I said, I think I'd like to be good at the airplane. And he goes, well, you should go to Top Gun. And, when I was a kid, my stepdad first said, you should be a fighter pilot. I remember thinking, that's what other people do. Like, that's not what we do. Or not we, but my brothers and I guess. But I proved that wrong. Like, no, I can do it. And so I had that initial response. Like I'd seen these guys in Fallon and they were the Jedis of naval aviation. And I thought, that's somebody else. That's not me. He goes, no, you can do it. And so long story short, I did a few things to throw my hat in the ring. And based on Chili's recommendation alone, according to other bros I've talked to, and a bro is just the term for a Top Gun instructor, they accepted me. And I went and I sat through the academics. And, you probably know this, and I don't know if it's come up on your show. The academics, the way they're presented at the Air Force and the Navy's weapons schools are different. And I don't think ours is better. I just say they're different. But the way that Top Gun does it is you don't look at the slides. You have it all memorized or at least understood so well you don't need to memorize it, but you can still teach it and know what to say. And the fella who, like on day 2, Homie Cedarholm, he's now the 3-star here in Camp Pendleton of all Marines. He had just murder boarded the day before. And his lecture reign was so polished, so free of distractions, that I was distracted thinking, oh crap, what have I done? I can't do this. And so I didn't learn anything about what he was teaching. I just sat there with self-doubt. And then fast forward, 8 months later, I'm standing giving my murder board and I pass and I think, my goodness, how is it a person can do this? And I'm not standing here or sitting here saying, look how great Jell-O was. I'm going to say though, I think it's amazing that the human can give a 2.5, 3.5 hour lecture completely without looking at the slides or notes from I won't even say from memory, but from your being, because you know it so well, because you've committed yourself to doing that. And so for me, it was a real great maturing process, like so much of my career was, because it again erased some self-doubt. Like if you pour yourself into something, you can do it. And that was just, by the way, the lectures. Then there's the flying and all these other things. But that was a really amazing tour.
You probably can relate to this. I was just talking to another FO on this past trip who taught pilot training like me. The one aspect I found really rewarding and very cool was you can take someone right off the street who barely can spell airplane, and then 4 months later, they're flying on the wing 3 feet away from you, solo, in the weather. But it's, I think, a testament to how we've built flight training, the lessons that have been learned in blood, all these things, just kind of a building block approach. That was my takeaway early on. It took me a while to figure this out after someone told me 15 different times, but it's just one step at a time. Now, you might have to be able to do one step at a time, all within a half a millisecond or whatever it might be, but it's a building block approach for a lot of these programs. And I think the military's done, at least with aviation, they've cracked the code for building aviators, and it comes to building block approach a lot of the times.
I think you're right, Rain. And I'll tell you, I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. A story, it's not totally related, but I think it's kind of important, and maybe your listeners will take some heart out of this. I was at a bar watching a football game with my son and his friend and his friend's dad, who is about mid-50s like me, has not ever been an aviator. But he says to me, hey, I'm thinking about getting an airplane because they've got this one with a parachute, so I can go wherever I want. And even after a beer, I was like, I think that's a really bad idea. And because you can't just get to that level, and you can't just say, I'm just going to use this parachute if I need it. And I tried to explain to him how expensive it is, and it's probably going to total the airplane. And because of that, you'll be reluctant to use it. And because of that, you'll probably fly in conditions where you'll die. And he didn't think much of that, but I haven't heard if he bought it yet or not. And I hope he doesn't. And I don't mean to call him out if he happens to be watching or listening. But yeah, you can't just, to your point, just go do the things that experienced aviators do and expect that you can fake it in a sense because you've got some get out of jail free card. And we all know of doctors and other people that fly when they shouldn't. JFK Jr., maybe, I don't know all the details of that, but I know he killed himself in a general aviation airplane. So yeah, it's serious business.
Well, I am legal to go get out there in a single engine, whatever, and go shoot an ILS. Would I do it? No way. It's like legal versus smart, proficient, all those things come into factor. So yeah, don't go buy a plane and just rely on the parachute. It's everything
parachute, Rain.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's an unforgiving business, but it's like anything. You gotta get the reps. You gotta have the experience, and it takes usually quite a while, and some hard lessons learned occasionally there. What was the most challenging aspect of Top Gun for you?
Well, just like in my history, it was either landings in the T2 or dropping bombs in the TA4. For some reason, I could not get past defensive BFM. And if your listeners and viewers aren't familiar with that, right, you have one-on-one maneuvering, and there's 100 different terms for this. But at least in the Navy, and I assume you guys do something similar, you can start in different positions relative to each other so that you can get certain learning objectives. You said earlier, part task training. So if I start, let's say you and I are going to go BFM or dogfight, ACM, again, whatever you want to call it. If I start behind you on purpose, 3, 2, 1, fights on, well, then I'm offensive, you're defensive. Now, we may not stay that way, depending on how it goes. And if you're behind me, then I might be defensive, you might be offensive. If we meet at a merge, like two cars passing on the highway, well, then we're high aspect. And then you turn and I turn, and we'll see who ends up offensive and defensive, maybe. The defensive is hard, as you know, because you're looking over your shoulder at the other guy, but then you got to look back in to see what your altitude and airspeed. And oh, by the way, you're trying to take snapshots outside in your mind so you can debrief it later and draw all the arrows accurately. And I just was close, but never quite, well, not never, but I was close to the Top Gun standard. And then we'd fly again that day or the next day, and I'd get closer yet, but like, hey, if you're going to wear the patch and instruct in this, you've got to be good at, you've got to reach the threshold, not good enough. You've got to reach the minimum. And it took me 10 tries, Rain, to finally pass defensive BFM. And it wasn't like they were thinking, what do we do selecting Jell-O here? We should go send him down the hall to somewhere else. It was just, hey, when you get it, then you'll get it, and then you can teach it, but not until then. And so once I finally did pass, and I can remember passing, it was very relieving. And it was with a pilot who unfortunately was later killed in a mishap. But I then internalized defensive BFM, and I found that I actually preferred it. Because I don't know about you, if I start behind you and I stay behind you, okay, whatever, that's kind of satisfying. But if I start in front of you and end up behind you, that's pretty cool. And if I start neutral and I end up behind you, okay, great, but that means you probably made a mistake. But if I start defensive and I can end up at least neutral, well, then I've done a good job, and it's not at your expense necessarily. So I came to enjoy it, but yeah, defensive BFM was once more, what is Jell-O going to suck at? And it just took a little persistence, and I got there.
Well, that might segue into, I believe, the last Navy aircraft you flew, which again was the mighty Viper, as an adversary.